Welcome to the UNbuild. We're going to unbuild this. I made this a couple years ago when I wasn't making YouTube videos, and I want to rebuild it, but I'm not going to use the same components. I need the mower, but I don't need the power wheels and some other stuff. So that's going to be part of the new build. I'm going to break this down for you into 4 separate sections. So from front to back, we have the steering system, we have the mower, we have the drive system, and then we have the communication system. And I'm going to break each of those down, starting from the front. Alright, the steering system is attached with 2 bolts on this side and 2 bolts on the other side. Use all kinds of zip ties to keep these wires under control, keep them away from the blades, keep them away from the heat. The linear actuator is connected at both ends. One end is attached to the vehicle, which means that it doesn't move relative to the entire vehicle. The other end is attached to the other end of the steering rack, which does move relative to the vehicle, which causes the wheels to turn. So this end is attached to this bar, and this end is attached to the vehicle, or this bar, because this bar is also fixed to that side. Now, this isn't powered, so I can't show you how that moves, but this moves when the wheels are turned. So the linear actuator is pulling and pushing this bar to turn left or right. So these wheels are actually attached through this 90-degree rod. It goes all the way through the tire and connects on the other side, and then goes all the way down into what was plastic on the actual toy. But I took that same thing and I captured it on this side. Well, this is the actual original nut that holds on the Power Wheel stuff. So I actually just reused that. I broke a few and had to use these in its place, but they do the same job. These are just like $6 a piece, which is kind of crazy. Now that I have a lathe, I can make my own. These are used in a lot of applications. Weber Grills uses them. This is just a plastic cap, and then, you see that? This ring kind of gets pressed on there. It's got like a one-way valve, so to take it off, we give it a little bit of a pinch in a couple directions sometimes. Nope. Oh, there it goes. When you go to put it back on, you just flatten it back out, and it's usually pretty good to go. Let's talk about the wood. This is all 2x4 garbage, okay? Even this was 2x4s. I think I just cut it down to size. I just shaped it until it fit. So your application might be a little different if you happen to use a different power wheel. This needed to be rounded to allow for the wheel to travel around it. The distance between these holes was determined by what was existing on the power wheel. So I then took this this is the steering bar, and this is the fixed bar, and these holes were existing, so I just bolted those down. This remains loose, and I drilled these holes for the linear actuator. I drilled this hole for the other end of the linear actuator. You can see here how I notched out this 2x4, and I glued and screwed this on. Put a couple of holes here that actually attach to the mower itself. And that was it. This is really crude, but it worked. I am going to keep all that in case I want to make another vehicle. So this is called a linear actuator. This is called an LAC, linear actuator control board. It's wired to work with standard hobby grade remote control stuff. So the wires coming from here going to something else are 2 things. One is straight up power. This needs 12 volts of power. And this is the other end of this black plug, which is for the radio. This is an old motor I got from my parents' house. It was sitting in the shed for, I think, 7 years unused, and it's probably 10 years older than that. I took the air filter out. There was a mouse nest in there. I cleaned it out. I put it back together. I took it outside and I started stretching because I knew this was going to be a war. It started on one pole. One pole. And it still starts on one pole, kind of. I broke the string. I didn't feel like repairing it. I wanted to use it that day. So I ended up taking off this whole housing, cutting out an opening to the top here, and I actually start it with a socket and a drill. And it starts the motor right up. Alright, so I've got a 12-volt battery on here for the linear actuator. Plugs right into there. And then I've got a communication system which ties directly in to the rear power system. So this 11.1 volt lithium polymer battery, LiPo battery, gives power to the entire drive system back here. It powers the ESC, electronic speed control, which allows variable speed in the two motors on the back of this. Now I'm going to disconnect that from the radio, which is the true communication system, and go over that in a minute. So both motors plug into this ESC. It's a dual motor ESC. That's important. And then this goes to the battery. These are like 20 or 30 bucks. This was a cheap one, made somewhere else, and it worked just fine. As you can see, this is pretty crude. I just rigged up a battery holder. I mean, this is all just like crap. Holy cow, I glued that on? That's pretty good. Anyways, I'm going to take off this plate, which is capturing the axle. And that's it. Forgot I had to reinforce this thing after a few months. This started to split open, the screws weren't holding, so I put a bunch of more screws in there. This thing was just a prototype with a million band-aids on it. But you can see, I just put a groove on the table saw. I just put a groove in here and a groove under there, and which was smaller than this, and just captured this. This entire thing, that entire thing came right off of the power wheels. I didn't do anything to it except put a different connector on there, and the rest is just the mower. So this part just bolted in two places just like it did in the front. These are the factory holes. They put a bunch of holes in there, and I just made this thing out of wood. There's 2x4, 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 cheeseburger. This is the receiver that controls everything. This talks to the transmitter, which looks like a drill gun. It's got a little round thing on it. I don't know where it is. I'm not going to look for it. And it's got 4 channels: auxiliary, throttle, steering. It has 3 channels: auxiliary, throttle, steering, and then the bottom one is to bind it. Don't worry about that. Binding is to get this to communicate with the transmitter. You'll learn that with the transmitter. So throttle is the power system in the rear. That's what drives the system. Steering should be self-explanatory. Auxiliary I did not use. Auxiliary is basically an on-off switch option, which I'm going to address in the next build. The ESC is throttle, and that gets plugged into the throttle slot. And then the linear actuator over here is steering, and that gets plugged into the steering spot. And that's really all that goes into this. So this tells the linear actuator board what to do. It then takes power from this battery over here, the 12-volt battery, and tells the linear actuator what to do. This plugs into the LiPo battery, which gives the drive system power. These 2 leads go to the 2 motors on the gearboxes. Now, this is RC stuff, so one thing that's not completely separate here is that this battery also gives the receiver power through the ESC. That's just how this system works. That's just how RC stuff works. There's only one battery on an RC car, and this is it. And it gives the ESC power, which delivers power to the other things that might be on there, especially the receiver. Here are the key terms: linear actuator board, control board, LAC board, which you would buy with this. LiPo battery, RC receiver, an RC ESC, electronic speed control, 12-volt battery, and I think that's it. So Google those and you'll learn a lot. I hope this was a little bit helpful. I didn't want to take this apart without at least showing you. So I know this wasn't a fun build video, but at least you got a little bit of information on how this was created, and hopefully that helps you make your own.